Hi, this is Dave Perry and you're watching Retro Gaming Revival live.
Evening and welcome to another episode of Retro Gaming Revival Live for another episode with a legend of the gaming industry. Hope everyone in the chat is okay and you're all keeping well. So who have we got with us this evening? We've got Nintendo Lee.
Evening all.
Triangle Face.
Hello.
Flunners.
All right.
Vanilla Doobs.
Greetings.
And we're pleased to be joined by retro gaming icon, TV producer, star of Games World and GamesMaster, the man who made friend of the show, Mean Machine Dean, cry on TV. You may know him as the Violet Blade. It's Rick Henderson.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello, very
Legend.
pleased to be here.
Thank you. And how are you this evening?
Yeah, very good. It's been a crazy day, actually, because I had to review 2 games in one day. WarioWare, the Get It Together on Switch, and Life is Strange True Colours, which both come out this Friday, and the embargoes both lifted today. Little did I know that at the beginning of the day.
My wife's actually pre-ordered Life is Strange, so any...
It's brilliant.
Okay.
It's brilliant. It's a genuinely sweet, heartfelt game that obviously in the Life is Strange way takes some sinister twists. Without giving any plot spoilers away, the main character has a brilliant power of telling you what emotions there are, and I can honestly say it's one of the most emotional games I've played in a long time. So there you go.
Wow.
Your wife will be happy.
yeah, definitely.
I must admit, your missus recommended the series to me, Brian, I think, at the time. And that first one, completely took me by surprise. Yeah, really good series.
Yeah, that's good.
Whereas my missus said, "Are you going to talk about the Sony Game Gear on this show?" So it just shows us.
Brilliant. Okay,
Brilliant.
so we've been joined by friend of the show, Cabbage Face Bricks. He's in the chat this evening, so evening to him. So we're going to get straight into it. We've got a lot to cover this evening, Rick, and I know your time is very precious. So I just want to thank you for being with us this evening. It's really, really appreciated. So a topic that we start with all of our guests is early gaming memories. So, what was your first console, first game, or what were your first experiences with video games?
I go back. So the first gaming machine we had in my family house was a Sharp MZ80K computer. And you couldn't really buy many games. I think Wampus was available on it. But computer and video games at that time used to publish listings for it. And how old was I? God, it must be 1978, something like that. And so my mum sat and typed in a World Cup Football Manager game in BASIC for a week. I mean, it took over a week of her just working every day just to put it in. And then it didn't work. Because it was so riddled with bugs. So so that was my earliest memory. We also had an Atari VCS, which I absolutely adored as a kid. I mean, what a machine to be suddenly given. I'm not sure. Obviously, your viewers will know this. Your listeners will know this. The games were hugely expensive. I mean, for the 1970s, each game was around £50.
That's mad.
Wow.
So you work that out, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So my My dad would genuinely spend sort of like save up a month or two's salary just by one game.
Wow.
So we had about, I think by the end of the life of the console, we had about 6 games in total. But I only ever played Space Invaders on it anyway. I mean, I was just absolutely obsessed by Space Invaders on it, to the extent where I finished it, even the levels right at the end that are invisible. All the invaders are invisible. You can only hit them by sound alone.
No way.
So, yeah, so that was my earliest. I think the first thing that I got that was just for me was a ZX Spectrum. And I got the 48K ZX Spectrum, and I had a RAM pack for it. I can't remember how much RAM was on the RAM pack. I mean, you imagine this RAM pack had less RAM on it than an email would use today. So, you know, and if you blew on it, it fell over and the whole game crashed. So, but I absolutely loved it. I loved it. That was probably the time when I became a very insular person and never came out of my bedroom. And just sat there constantly, listening to Sam Cooke and playing games, and James Brown, and just playing games constantly on the ZX Spectrum. Because the other great thing about the Spectrum, of course, was the advent of budget games. And for me, that was massive. I had so many Mastertronic titles and Fire titles that I just it was such an amazing thing to be able to just go to the shop with your own pocket, with just pocket money, buy a new game every week. And in some ways that was brilliant. Some other ways it spoilt it for me, because now I've got this almost disposable sort of like habit of games are a disposable medium, and I kind of forget to finish a game before I move on to another one and go, you know, and but that's basically it. Oh, I love it. Wears a purple sash. He's a violet blade. Aha!
Okay,
but yeah, so there you go. There's my earliest memories of video game.
Okay, and did you have a favourite game from that era that you always go back to, even now?
BMX Simulator.
Yes, is that the Oliver Twins one?
Yeah, the Oliver Twins one.
Classic.
I mean, and to give you a perspective on this, no matter what I've done throughout my career in gaming, no matter whoever I've spoken to, and also I used to also do interviews for the Enemy and stuff like that. No matter who I've spoken to, I still get starstruck when I meet anyone connected to Codemasters. Totally and utterly starstruck, because their output was incredible back in the early 80s to mid 80s. The Codemasters output was superb. And so Codemasters, so BMX Simulator, obviously Manic Miner. I think everybody would say Manic Miner was a game that they so fondly remember that every time it's come out on anything, I'll get a copy, if only to have that awful music just
and the sounds
me
as well.
For the rest of the day. Yeah.
The sound effects, you know, just going around the course. When you sort of like fell down. Oh, yeah, classic.
So those from that era. Then of course I got into. I was very young when I became an actual games journalist. So there's an awful lot of games from that era as well that are probably still very much considered retro. And from that era, SWAS, Sensible World of Soccer.
Yeah.
I very proudly got to the semi-finals of the Sensible World of Soccer World Cup.
Wow.
Where I lost against Simon Byron, who is another games industry legend in many respects.
Wow.
And what team did you play as in the?
I was Cameroon.
Okay, interesting.
Roger Miller.
Yeah.
And
It was that year, wasn't it? It was that year, the 1990 World Cup, 1990. So, and Cameroon were extraordinary at that time, but also it was the only shirt left. Because when you arrived, John Hare gave everybody a shirt, and he goes, "You're late. This is the only shirt I have left." Well, actually, tell a lie. Dominic Diamond was behind me, but he wasn't going to give him me the Scotland shirt and him the Cameroon shirt.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Well, I think he drew the short straw there anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he went out in the quarterfinals anyway. So
He probably still holds a Scottish record in a major football tournament, getting to that quarterfinal.
I really
I apologise.
Hope he's not watching.
Okay. Okay, that's like a good time to move on to our next topic, I guess, is how you broke into the gaming industry. So, you know, was it something you always wanted to do, or were you at school, college, and it's something you just fell into?
I was hugely lucky. I quit school. Quit is the better word than kicked out in sixth form. So I kind of at that time I was editing a fanzine that Ian Livingstone and Steve Jackson were talking about at the time. So I'd already done quite a lot of tabletop gaming fanzines and Dungeons and Dragons fanzines. So I was interested in the journalism side, but I was absolutely a video games nut. And I basically I had to get a job. So I looked around for what was close to journalism. I took a junior position at a public relations company for a little while. And while I was there, it gave me more access to sort of like media job adverts. There was a tiny little job advert for, I can't even remember the name of the company now, Focus, who were looking for a very, very junior staff writer on a new weekly games magazine they were launching, and called Computer Games Week, which was the sister magazine to Popular Computing Weekly. And I thought, well, I like my games. I think I can write. Found out I couldn't, but I think I can write. And so I'll go for it. And it was only on YTS. Now, obviously, older listeners will remember the YTS scheme. It was basically the government giving you pocket money to get you into work somehow, with somewhere down the line the idea that you might get a job. And it was getting £40 a week to work on this, and I worked very long hours because it was a weekly, and there was only 5 of us, and we had to do 64 pages of editorial a week. So it was a hard job, but it was a baptism of fire. I mean, it really was. And at that time, we were reviewing Spectrum. Commodore 64 was still just about hanging in. ST and Amiga. I had an ST by then anyway. But also the consoles were just creeping in. I mean, Master System and NES. So there was plenty to write about, plenty of games, and it was a great learning for me to have to write quickly and it was very immediate because it was weekly. But also I had to write a lot of video game reviews on lots of different platforms, many of which I'd never seen at that point. Within 6 months, that magazine folded. It might have been a year. It's quite hard. Some of it's a bit sketchy. And weirdly, even though I was 18 at the time, I may have even been 17. I got a shout from the publisher saying that we're having to close the magazine, but we'd like you to be the assistant editor of Amstrad Computer User. Now, I had no experience of editing anything other than stuff I was photocopying. And so, so it was like a thing. I lasted 3 months. I was out of debt. I'm out of my depth because there was no staff or anything. But it obviously made an impact because I was then offered a job at Your Commodore, and that lasted a bit longer. That was quite a big job that ended up me being editor-in-chief of Your Commodore, Your Amiga, Commodore Disk User, and that kind of really put me on the map in terms of a games journalist. And that kind of set me on this path, really.
Wow.
In many respects.
Wow.
Yeah. After that, I left the games industry. So go figure.
Awesome,
and became
to be brought into all of that at such an early age. I think that's I think with most things that is like a really key thing. Generally, people that are in jobs and industries that they genuinely love get into it from an early age, whether that's through luck or just sort of shoehorning yourself in there.
It's a passion project of mine to try and give similar people either advice or opportunities, like I had. Because quite frankly, I came out of school with some GCSEs or O levels, as we called them back then, and little else. I had a passion for the subject matter, and at that time, that was more important. And so I tried to instill that a little bit into whatever I've done ever since. That I would like to have people on my team, not everybody, but at least some, that have the passion for the subject matter rather than just the knowledge of writing or making television or whatever. And that we'll come on to it soon, I'm sure, but that's where Games World and GamesMaster came in, because that's what they did. Is they put very passionate gamers, very good TV people together, and taught each other the jobs. And that's why we came out with what I still believe is the best gaming television show that will ever be.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So at the point then of GamesMaster, I hope I haven't jumped ahead too much here. What were you?
You've only missed out me being production editor of Bella, which we can skirt over. I'm pretty certain.
Well, that must have been fun at some point.
There wasn't as much gaming, it must be said. At one point I was also doubling on Take a Puzzle, so that had a little bit of gaming in it, but only if you like crosswords.
Okay. This stream has finally got some interest from my mum, because she used to read Bella magazine when I was younger.
Yeah, classic.
Oh, dear.
Love it.
And then GamesMaster called.
Okay,
or at least Games World called.
Yeah. Okay, so it was Games World first, was it, before?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, a lot of people think that I worked behind the scenes on GamesMaster. I actually never did. I was always behind the scenes on Games World and other projects at Hewland. But GamesMaster, I was obviously involved. I mean, it was such a symbiotic relationship anyway. We all shared the same games room. We all shared the same assets and an awful lot of the same staff. But I actually only ever appeared on screen on GamesMaster, which we can, and I'll tell you how at some point. But with Games World, that's when Games World called. And what it was a friend of mine who I'd known through the journalism side of things, because at that time, the video games magazine industry was very, very niche, very close-knit and quite small. I mean, it wasn't very big. And we all knew each other, and we all went to the same parties together. We all hung out with each other. We all knew each other very, very well indeed. And so when somebody a friend of mine had gone to work on GamesMaster, he called me up and said, Rick, we're going to launch a brand new sister show to GamesMaster called Games World. Are you interested in an interview for it? Because we're looking for games people, not necessarily TV people. And I just went, and I was production editor of Bella at the time, so I just went, yes, without a shadow of a doubt. Took the job. I took a quarter of the wages to take it because I was so keen. I believed in the project. I thought it was just fantastic. And also Doug Johns, who was the guy who called me, who ended up being the games messiah in Games World. He was, he still is one of my best friends. So, it was also an opportunity to work with a best friend. So it was like, of course I will. I'm coming. I'm coming over. It was a daunting first day because I went in, and not only did I find out another of my best friends who I didn't know had gone for the interview was also starting at the same company on the same day, Chris Knight, and another guy who started on the same show as me as a researcher was Richard Osman.
Pointless.
From Pointless,
I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah. And he was a researcher on the first series of Games World.
Wow.
And he here's a story. I'm not sure I've said this many times, but first thing he said to me, "Hi, I'm Richard. I'm Richard. What's your name?" And I said, Richard. And he said, "So what have you done?" And we were just chatting away. And I said, "What you into?" He said, "I'm into music." I said, "Oh, well, funny enough, I used to write stuff about all manner of bands, and I wrote something about Suede, and I told this story about how I didn't like Suede, but then the end review lied and said it liked it, even though it wasn't my copy. They put my name on it, and I was saying it, but Suede was rubbish, and da, da, da. And he went, "My brother is the bassist in Suede."
Awkward.
Okay.
And that was my introduction to Richard Osman.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So what did you?
I don't like Suede, but I like the bassist. He's really good. Yeah.
You know, I backtracked so much on that one. It was like, well, they weren't very good that night.
So when you went to Games World, what was your title or position that you
I was
applied
just
for?
a researcher on the first show, or the first batch of shows. I was a researcher. I struggle to remember because Games World was mental in the fact that it was 26 weeks, 5 episodes a week of brand new shows. And you consider that GamesMaster at that point was probably only doing 10 shows a series. That it was just a crazy undertaking. So my memory is kind of sketchy on exactly how many of them shows I worked on and which ones. I know I definitely started on Beat the Elite, and Eliminator, which was the Videators one, which went on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. But I also remember doubling on House of Games, which was presented by Jane Goldman, Jonathan Ross's wife. And I also remember being in the edit suite with the other guys as well. I can't remember what the other show was now.
The one with the games.
Madam Pixel's Peep Parlor, the one with David Williams, of course, and who genuinely, in the scenes where he's only got a plant pot in front of his genitals, he genuinely was nude. And let's just say that as soon as the cameras weren't on, that plant pot came off and he just chased after you. That was David Williams for you.
Brilliant.
Or David Williams as he was then. But yes, so I kind of mainly worked on I worked across pretty much all of them. By the end of that series, I seem to remember, it might have been just before the next series, I was associate producer. And by the following series, I was series producer. So I worked my way up very, very quickly because it was a lot of TV. By that point, you've made so much TV. You've done the same work some people do in a year that, that they might do in 5 years in the industry. But yeah, and it was solely Games World at that point because I seem to remember that GamesMaster only came knocking. I mean, I did series, was it 5, 6, and 7? So Games World series 1 and 2, I think, or at least half of 2, I hadn't done GamesMaster by that point.
Okay, so when was the point that you became an on-screen personality then on Games World?
Yeah, well, beginning of season 2, we had decided that, no disrespect to the former Videators, or most of them, I think only 3 of them made the cut to the second series, and for numerous reasons. I mean, dressing someone up in a gimp mask and calling him the executioner possibly wasn't the wisest decision for children's television. But for a number of reasons, they didn't quite make the cut. So when we got to the second season, we needed a fresh batch of Videators. We held quite a few auditions. We called up a few friends, or some. Again, one of the things I'm sure Alex Ferrier has said this on a previous episode, that a lot of the time we found Videators out of contestants who had been on GamesMaster. Alex Ferrier being a prime example. But the second season, what we realised is we needed people who were just as comfortable in front of the camera as they are playing a video game. First season, we kind of mainly just had people playing video games.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
it, that
second
Alex covered-
season,
So as I say, that's the thing that
see,
Alex mentioned
we were
on-
looking
you
for
gotta find
more
someone
Alexes.
good at both, didn't you? Yeah, you got to find
We
someone
were
that's good on camera
absolutely-
and good at the games, and
Yeah.
not just one of the two.
100% looking for more Alexes, and that was
yeah.
kind of the remit. And we kind of sort of sat there, and we went for a few people. We found a few, here, there, and everywhere. Colin, the console cowboy. Actually, I can't remember if he was Series 2 or Series 3, but he was a nice guy. But oh man. So we found a few, but there were gaps. And Jane Hewland said to me, "Why don't you do it? You just goof about all the time. You're pretty thing." And at that time, I had a little goatee beard, and she said, "You could do a Errol Flynn kind of pirate." And so I went, "All right, I'll do it." I genuinely, I've never been one to shy away from a challenge. I went, "Yeah, all right. I'll have it. I'll have a crack." But and then I took the producer at the time to one side, and because I was about to write the show as well as be on it. I said, "I don't want to just be an Errol Flynn sort of like dash-in pirate. I think that will go down really badly. I have to be the campest pirate, someone that is so unlikely to turn up at any video gaming thing ever." And I said, and first it was going to be the pink pirate, or the pink spatula, as one of my friends called me. And I said, no, that's too Carry On. I mean, if you've watched any Violet Blade footage, me saying that's too Carry On is just something else entirely. I said, no, let's make him purple. Oh, Violet, the Violet Blade. And so the Violet Blade was born. Also, it was a slight little thing because Violet Berlin was on Bad Influence on another channel at the time, and she was a good friend of mine. So I thought it was quite funny that I was going to nick her name. So he said, call it the Violet Blade, and it'll be a comedy character. It'll be pantomime. It won't be Errol Flynn dashing, "I'm trying to take this seriously." It'll be someone who thinks so much that he's genuinely a pirate, and thinks genuinely that he's brilliant at games, but he's actually neither. He's just someone that almost, it's like he's on day release. And that was my remit. That I thought, I can write that. I can't write, I'm a fantastic pirate and I'm going to beat you again.
So when you were playing games against contestants, would you always go in with the aim of beating them, or were you ever kind of nudged towards let the contestants win? You were always trying to beat them.
Well, yes and no. This might be a confession. I don't know if I've ever said this on anything ever
Exclusive
out loud. But as I worked on the show, I could also be the fall guy if needed. And that meant, right, and and by that, it's not that I threw a game. If we realised that someone was doing really badly, or we needed more people in the final because we were running out of contestants because we weren't beating anybody, then they would put me in at a game I'm not good at. So it wasn't that it was rigged. It's that it
was stacked in their favour a bit more.
Yeah. So if you look at them, generally beat 'em ups, I lost. Right? People used to think I had an unbelievable win ratio, but that's only because I was good at Super Smash, tennis, and FIFA. Right? But beat 'em ups, I still am to this day. I'm not good at Super. Just awful at them. And so, so if you ever saw me playing Mortal Kombat, you're pretty much going, yeah, he's going to lose. Unless it was Clay Fighters, in which case all bets are off. Nobody knows who's going to win this one. Because that was an awful game.
It wasn't great, was it?
There was no strategy whatsoever.
No, we've just had in the chat, Me Machine Dean. I can hear that excuse train coming.
No, with Dean, genuinely, he won. He genuinely won because he was an extremely talented player. And there were, more often than not, we had excellent contestants that could have easily been videators themselves. And the other thing that and it sounds like an excuse as well, but the other thing that that came with being a videator is you had all the pageantry. And a lot of us weren't actors. I mean, I went to acting school, which is another reason why Jane wanted me to do it. I went to Anna Sher Children's Theatre. But I hadn't used that for many, many years. But a lot of them weren't. And yet I was giving them quite convoluted scripts. There was all the makeup. There was all the costume. There was always, they had to remember where to stand. They had to answer a question that Bob Mills was always going to give them. So, there was a lot of that. And then they had to play a game against a contestant whose only remit was to play the game.
Yeah, and they've been practicing as well.
And they had been practicing, whereas, again, probably another exclusive. We rarely practiced.
Okay, well, what I've got here is a clip of you as Violet Blade. So I'm just going to show that, just a short promo clip.
The Violet Blade. Having been released from Alcatraz, he's the original software pirate. He's bold, he's brash, he wears a purple sash. Are you tough enough to take on this brigand? Please welcome the Violet.
Wow, those dance moves, tremendous.
That was from season 3. And the reason I know that is because I had the bandana. In season 1, I just had an open top blouse. It was a woman's blouse because it was really frilly. And for the first half of that season, I had a chest wig. But I was horribly allergic to it. It turned out I was really allergic to it. So I was there's one episode where it's just going red and red and red all up my face like that because of this stupid chest wig. So we got rid of the chest wig. And of course, it then just looked like I was naked under this blouse. So because it was really deep cut. And the second season, and also by that point, Jay Hewlin was going, I don't like this pantomime character you play for whatever reason, this carry-on character. Can you toughen him up a bit? And of course, toughen him up meant bandana.
Yeah.
Dave Perry, one of the toughest guys in the business, right?
Yeah.
Bandana. And so brought in the bandana, brought in a sort of like a suede singlet, brought in, still had the stupid plastic swords. I actually got stopped in customs once for having those plastic swords.
No way.
They were literally from a pound shop or something. They were like toy swords that you would buy a toddler. They weren't even like long. They were just toy swords that you would give to a toddler. And I had them in a bag. And because something my bag was scanned, they said, "Excuse me, sir." And they opened up the bag and they said, "What are these?" And I went, "I'm a pirate." Not sure it helped. So I toughened the character up. And and I don't know if you remember seeing that series, but halfway through that series, I start on a campaign, and this is where Dean will come into the story. I decided that Games World, because it was on every single night, needed a common thread. Being a massive comic book fan and being a massive fan of Crisis of Infinite Earths, I decided that at least 1 week, or maybe 2, we needed a thread that ran through every show on Games World. So I said, and it will be the Violet Blade that causes trouble, basically. And what it is that Violet Blade gets fired from the show, and then he causes trouble on every other show until he's finally reinstated. Now, to get fired from the show, I had to do something outrageous. So I built up that week by beating up a friend of mine who was the researcher. He was in the crowd, and every episode he got more and more beaten up by me as I came on or came off. I punched him, anything. By the end, he's on crutches, and then I just grabbed him and I took him through the curtain, punching him as I went through. Got quite a few complaints, but then on the show that Dean was on, is the show I had to be fired eventually for all the aggressive behaviour. And so I brought on a baseball bat. Now, Dean, we should have told him. We should have actually have informed his family. I did say something to, I think, one of his family members that there's going to be something alarming in the show. I'm not going to hurt your son, but it might shock him. But we don't want him to know because we need an honest reaction. So I come running on with a baseball bat, an aluminium baseball bat, and I smack when it's not my turn, when it was Big Boy Barry's turn, and I smacked Alex in the stomach with it. Also, Alex went, you're going to have to sort of like get quite close to me because otherwise it'll look fake. And I properly hit him. I properly went bang right in the stomach with this baseball bat. Dear. He let out sort of like a big shout, and Dean jumped 10 foot in the air. Yeah. I mean, properly. And then I was dragged off by security, and then the rest of the show went on. So, and that's how that's how we changed my character. I became the Violent Blade, although we don't really talk about the name that much, because Sky wouldn't let me call that. Sky just went, "There's no way you're calling it the Violent Blade. You're still the Violet Blade, but you don't wear violet, and you're violent."
Well, we've got the Dean clip here. I was going to play it for our viewers who haven't seen it before. We had to speed it up at the end there because we didn't want to bring back any nightmares to Dean for those. Yeah, he's in the chat.
Dean, yeah. Bless him.
You mentioned that you're going to get in trouble with Sky for calling it the Violent Blade. I have to ask, jumping to GamesMaster, I'm watching a lot of GamesMaster at the moment, just going back watching some old ones. What's with all the different innuendos and stuff on the show? But they're like just trying to see how much they can get away with, because some of them, I don't think I even noticed as a kid. Watching back now, I'm like, yeah, they're getting away with quite a lot.
We did the same on Games World as well. If you actually go back and watch old Games Worlds, there's an awful lot of that in there as well. David Williams especially. I mean, he was master at it. But what we did with GamesMaster is we had a genuine plan. Certainly, there was that change in GamesMaster about season 5, where all of a sudden the commentators were regulars, not just games industry people that came in and out. The reviewers were regulars. And me and Kurt Ewan were actually friends with Dominic's anyway. So we decided that we were going to stretch to hit a little bit higher. And if we aimed at dads and mums and basically sort of like older children, the younger children would love us because we're not talking down to them then. To us, in our mid-20s, and having the time of our lives, that meant as many knob gags as we could get in as possible. And we did. Did we do that. There were even bets. Me and Dominic would always go, right, I'm gonna say something worse than you. And he'd go, no. There's no way you're gonna say something.
Brilliant.
Did you ever get I think Channel 4 or anything? Did he ever like pull you up on it, or did you just
not on GamesMaster? Funny enough, there's only one moment on GamesMaster I can't even repeat. That they said stop the filming. It was something I said about Athlete Kings on the Saturn. Was it Saturn or was it Dreamcast? Saturn. I said something about and it was it touched on someone's disability. So and we just all of us looked at each other and went, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Yeah. So we cut the only time we ever cut anything out. So we didn't do that, and we ended up basically using. In fact, I can't remember which season it is, but there's even a moment where Dominic, at one point, says to me, "So Rick," and he says some question. I just went, and they just went, "That's staying in, mate." In my earpiece, they went, "That's staying in." You look complete idiot, and that's staying in, and it did. It broadcast.
Brilliant.
And the other thing is there was I think it might have been my first series on series 5 where we had Donna Eyre and the other girl that was in her band, I think Shampoo, I think they were called. And I said at one point she is quite literally fisting her. Based on the beat 'em up they're playing. And that went in. But the best one of all time, and it's on YouTube, look it up, it's Dominic's. Nothing will ever beat this. It was the Zoe Ball. It was the girly special. It was the Zoe Ball episode where she's riding her bikes, maybe Super Hang-On, certainly an arcade machine. And she's overtaken by 2 bikes. And he said, 2 men have literally slipped inside her.
It's amazing they got away
I
with
thought
it.
that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, but that's it. You've won. We're not worthy.
I can't think which episode it is. I think it might be there was quite a lot of tennis tournaments, I think, and they were trying to decide who was going to go in what order, and there was 2 guys and a girl, and it's the way that Dominic just lined them up, and he's like, well, if you go first, Lash, you go second, and Matey Boy, if you just come up the rear, you're just thinking,
Yeah.
whoa.
Yeah.
You watch
Yeah.
it now. I think I said it on when we had Dave Perry on, but I've watched quite a lot of GamesMaster with my son. My son's like 18, and he quite like watches old and stuff, but he genuinely enjoys GamesMaster because he's just like, he thinks it's just so funny, and he is just like, you couldn't say that now.
No.
It's like,
You
I'm
can't
not
say
entirely sure
anything.
you were allowed to say it then.
That's
but-
what I miss.
Yeah.
Dominic, I mean, I always used to say, I mean, it never happened, but I always used to say whenever I go onto something new in TV, Dominic would always be my first port of call. The man was a genius. A lot of what looked like off the cuff, he was as good at off the cuff as he was anything else. But a lot of what looked like off the cuff was meticulously written as well by himself.
Oh.
So it's like Eddie Izzard always used to say. I've interviewed Eddie Izzard, and he said that everything he does on stage is meticulously planned, timed, and said in that order, even when it looks like he's making a mistake. And Dominic was like that as well. He was meticulous. He was so good at it. He was so good. Another favourite of mine was when Uri Geller came on, and Dominic's petrified of was at the time anyway, petrified of mind control and hypnotism and things like that. And when Uri Geller came on, he'd phoned ahead and he said, we'll give you, I'll just want you to draw a household object on a piece of paper, on a post-it note or something, anything at all. Dominic went into his dressing room, didn't show a soul, nobody on the production team, not one. Uri Geller came on and he sit there and then literally said, think of it. It was matched pair of scissors. Match for match. It was incredible. He then played a game where he was meant to control it by his mind with these 2 things that stuck on his head. This game. I can't remember what the game was, but it was a skiing game. And you're meant to think left, right, left, right. And he had to shout out because obviously it wouldn't have been a very good challenge on television if he hadn't. But you're meant to do it just mentally. And he won. He won the Golden Games Master joystick. Goes off, and this was Dominic's idea. Put it on They put the stickers, the mind control pads on a hot cup of tea as well, and that won the challenge as well. And he gave that a Golden Games Master joystick.
Brilliant.
So
he was just a clever guy.
Yeah, no, definitely. We would love to have him on the show. We have reached out to him, but if he is listening, we would really love to have Dominic Diamond on here with us.
I'm sure he will one day. I think he just needs a break after the ruthless plug-in of the GamesMaster book that's coming out. That he did a month of just podcasts. To give you an idea, he's not done my podcast yet neither. So.
Okay, so how did GamesMaster come about then? You're working on Games World, and was it a friend who was at GamesMaster at the time, or had they seen you on Games World?
I think it was. It's a sketchy memory, but I think it was because I was on Games World anyway, and we all worked in the same office. I think, and I was really good friends with Dominic anyway by that point. And I think they were looking to change things up and looking for a regular cast rather than just things. And I had actually appeared on GamesMaster on the Dexter Fletcher run. In the live GamesMaster Live, I'd set up all the equipment, so I'm actually on it for a brief period of time. I don't say anything, but I'm in the background. And then I was in a feature, I think, the following season as well about Football Manager or Championship Manager. It was. So I'd already been on, and so when they were sort of like talking about it, it might have been Dominic that said it. It might have been Johnny Finch, the producer, but one of them came up to me and said, "Rick, would you mind?" And it wasn't like I tried out for it. It was, would you mind turning up tomorrow and doing it? And that's it. Yeah, we want you to be a co-commentator, and it's up to you whether you do it or not. The disaster behind it, and I was very excited. I mean, ultimately, I joined GamesMaster had already been running when I joined Hewland. and I watched it. And my only connection to it beforehand is I'd interviewed Dominic Diamond on Christmas Eve for one of my magazines years ago, when it very first launched. So I was already a fan when I kind of came to Hewland International. So I was genuinely very thrilled, even though I'd been working with the guys, even though I was good friends with them. I was very thrilled to be asked. Very massive honour to be asked to be on that show. And so I immediately said yes. And the night before the first batch of recording, I went out, had a few drinks, and I got in a fight with a bunch of Dutch squaddies, and got punched in the face, and so hard that my eye came out to about there.
Oh my God.
And I turned up the next day for filming, my very first ever day on GamesMaster, with an eye the size of the Bismarck, and the makeup lady saying, "I have no idea what I'm going to do." So if you watch the challenges, my first ever challenge was with Stephen Hendry, and the first thing that happened is I'm sat there, and they did it so that I was sat there, and sort of like I was mainly in profile, so that you didn't see my eye. To be honest, the makeup team did an incredible job. It's hard to spot anyway. But then Stephen Hendry and Stephen Hendry walks out and he just burst out laughing. I mean, the first thing he did, he just pointed at me and just burst out laughing. I went, "What happened to you?"
That's nice of him.
I went, long story, beaten up by Dutch squaddies. And he went, "Oh, well, looked around. Is this the sort of show that I'm on?" Yeah. So that's how my GamesMaster journey started. But so I was, after that, I then was doubling the two. I would get a cab, go and film my bits for GamesMaster, then get straight to the Games World studios, or we were probably in pre-production more at that point. We never really overlapped productions, and worked on Games World. Then I would have to cab it back to GamesMaster and do my bits and backwards and forwards. So it was a bit of a balancing act at times, so much so that I remember, because I did all the reviews for season 5 and 6 as well, that I had to do some reshoots for reviews for GamesMaster while Games World was going, and I'd shaved my hair. No, had I shaved it, or had I bleached it yellow? It was one or the other.
You bleached it blonde because there's a clip that I've seen with you got blonde highlights. I think it is.
Yeah. And it completely buggered up continuity. So if you're watching some of them, I've got a hat on, like a backwards hat. It was the only hat they could find for me as well. It's like a hunting hat. In the middle of summer, I've got this massive hunting hat on to try and hide every single bit of my hair because I looked absolutely ludicrous. I mean, I looked ludicrous anyway. I was meant to be blonde. It looked bright orange. It was horrible. And also that series, I think that was series 6, my favourite series by a long way. I had this shirt I bought from Top Man because we supplied our own clothes, and I thought this will look good on TV. I've looked back on it since, and I had a pinstripe, massive shouldered suit, which I presume were trending at the time, and a collar, an orange collar that came out to about there. I looked like a BG.
Brilliant.
It's mad.
Follow that right.
But yeah.
And were there any sort of standout celebrities you met on GamesMaster? That you pinch yourself to this day that you
all the football ones, all the football. I'm such a big football fan. Me and Dominic were always a bit in awe of all the footballers that came on the show, and I also had the honour because I did one season. I did the commentary for a match between Phil Babb, who was playing for Liverpool at that time, and I'm a big Liverpool fan, and Graham Lasso, I think it was. So I did sort of like commentated the football the football matches, and then the following season, they decided that they were going to get Jim Rosenthal to do the commentary over the footballers. Mm-hmm. But one of the footballers, Stan Collymore, didn't turn up, and so I got a call and said, "Could you stand in because you're the FIFA expert on the team? Can you stand in and actually play the game against Chris Armstrong from Spurs?" So I turn up in a taxi, and which is far more than Stan Collymore ever did. We can't talk an awful lot about that because he tried to sue Dominic at one point.
Really?
But yeah, because of what happened. But anyway, I turn up in the taxi, and Chris Armstrong is there, and he just went to me. He goes, "They went. This is the guy who's going to be playing you at the game." And he went, "No way! I'm never going to beat the Violet Blade." I was going, "Oh my god, this is incredible! This is incredible!" And he went, "People watch these shows. We all watch these shows." You know, so that was a big old moment. The nicest guy I think I met on the set was Danny John Jules from Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
He was such a lovely man. I mean, genuinely lovely man. Zoe Ball was incredibly lovely as well. I don't think I was starstruck by many. I think by that point we were cocky and arrogant. I mean, you know, you consider that at one point GamesMaster had only over 4 million viewers. So people were coming up to us and going, "Oh, well, we've done Big Breakfast." And we're going, "Yeah, we've got twice as many viewers." So I don't know if I was certainly starstruck by a lot of people outside of GamesMaster. And in fact, more starstruck perhaps when I met people like Julian Rignall and video gaming legends of yesterday. But the one I can tell you that I liked the least was Paul McKenna. Because he genuinely turned up with an entourage, or at least a bodyguard. You know, the hypnotist who used to also
yeah.
He turned up with a bodyguard. We all got turfed out of the green room because he wanted it as his dressing room. He was just such a prima donna, and when I was trying to help him with the game and teach him some of the game, he just could not be bothered whatsoever. It was just purely an appearance for him.
Wow.
And quite rightly, he did appallingly at the game, and it's also the most savage me and Dominic have ever been about anybody during the commentary. We were absolutely savage because he was just not. Now, he's by all accounts, he's a very nice guy. He's sort of like he's changed, and he's very nice. But that time, he just could. I think it was more he just didn't want to be there, and sometimes that happens. And we did have a few of them. All Saints was another one where they just didn't want to be there. And you can tell that in the interview that Dominic does with them at the beginning of the show. They really didn't want to be there. And I commentated over that. I don't remember saying a single word to them. They were there, gone.
That's such a shame, because it's such an iconic show. And they need to respect it a bit more, I think. It's just such a shame.
Yeah, totally. I think there were shows that came before me that I would have been a lot more starstruck, like Vic Reeves. Vic Reeves on season 2, I think it was. I mean, I would have been in tears. I would have been so starstruck with Vic Reeves. I was such a fan at the time, and in fact, a lot of the stupid side of the comedy that was put into GamesMaster is almost entirely down to Vic and Bob. You know, even take that. What a coup at the time, even massive. Towards the end of it, you know, we had some nice guests, but I don't remember any I really sort of like took to. I thought, wow, how we got in. Vinnie Jones. There you go. There's one. Vinnie Jones.
Did you have the same? Because when we spoke to Dave Perry, we asked him about this, and he said he almost felt on the same level as these celebrities because of what you were doing on GamesMaster. Did you feel like that as well? There was that. Because it wasn't that I felt like I was a celebrity, although some people will say I certainly acted like one in a curry house or something. But because I wasn't. I mean, I've never seen myself. I never saw myself. I was more aware of its impact after it all finished than during. At the time, I thought there were two things. Firstly, I thought it's just a bunch of mates cocking about. Second, and people seem to like that. Secondly, I always got the feeling that GamesMaster and GamesWorld weren't taken seriously by the TV business because of the subject matter. And I've actually spoken a lot about that since. And I've always felt that that we should have been. We created format that even Top Gear uses to this very day.
Yeah.
And we did things that we made. People seem to think, they were video games TV shows. They weren't. They were TV shows about video games. That's a very, very different kind of way of looking about things. Because what we said is that video games are the tool for entertainment, but the shows are entertaining, regardless. Could have been about, pit fighting or cockfighting or anything, which is probably one of the many innuendos we would have said on the show.
No doubt. Because it's going back to the Chris Armstrong. That's the clip I actually watched, and that's where you've got your yellow sort of highlights.
Yeah,
you've got a bright yellow shirt on as well, or a t-shirt or a polo shirt, so it sort of clashes.
Oh yeah. It was actually neon green, but it came out
it was very,
which was a blessing, because quite frankly, neon green did not suit any man or beast.
But yeah, you played him. I've got it here on my notes. Sega Worldwide Soccer, and I don't know if this is a spoiler, but he beat you 1-0. But you had a player sent off, and the goal he scored, it was very dodgy. It's like a big chip.
Oh, it's a fantastic goal.
No, it's very
Was
dodgy
it?
goal.
Didn't I also? I can't remember, but did I also throw the ball out from my goalkeeper? Throw it out to the side at one point and throw it out for a throw in near my box. And the reason why I say that is because while on Games World we might have put us with games that we'd never played before, let's just say you couldn't have had one of the co-commentators in the final of the football special of GamesMaster.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of handheld in that game.
Yeah, because I've got a bit of trivia for Chris Armstrong. I don't know if I should say it actually, but it's common knowledge. But he is the first ever Premier League player to fail a drugs test. He's the first player.
Is he?
Yeah, he
was also the most expensive teenager in history.
Yeah, is it 4.5
until very recently? Yeah. So he was a big deal at the time, and then
he was, yeah.
Vanished, didn't he? I'll tell you one other challenge that I absolutely adored. Two actually. They keep popping into my head. The cricketers one with Tuffers, Phil Tufnell, and was it Adam Hollyoake or was it Ben Hollyoake? I know that Ben Hollyoake died.
Yeah,
it was very, very sad. But that was brilliant, playing a baseball game. That was very, very fun. I was probably funnier because of what happened behind the scenes than on the scenes, because they were just funny guys. It was just banter, a lot of banter. The other one was, and all the banter was on screen, was the Athlete Kings one that I told you one of my jokes would cut out. That was one of the funniest days I've ever had at work, ever. Because John Regis, and I can't remember the other athlete who was doing it, would not stop laughing for the whole thing. And it was the one where me and Dominic burst into laughter, and we actually just have uncontrollable giggles for a while without even being able to say anything. It genuinely is. It was just one of those days that was a good day at work. That was a really good day.
Okay, and you could say not such a good day for someone at work. You've worked on GamesMaster, so I feel that we have to talk about it. The Dave Perry incident. We've talked to Dave about it, and we've listened to his side of the story. And you probably get asked about this a lot, but what can you tell us about that day and how it all came about?
There's some things I won't say because Dave's a good friend, or always was, and I really liked Dave. I haven't spoken to him as much, but we have chatted on Facebook occasionally. But if you're listening, Dave, I certainly would, be more than happy to have more conversations in the future because I genuinely really like Dave, and I really like Dominic. So I was kind of stuck in the middle with me and Kirk. Kirk's obviously an old friend of Dominic, so slightly with more. But I felt a little bit stuck in the middle. But what I will say is that by the point the show even started, Kirk and I had been sitting around for hours. I mean, genuinely hours. And Derek, but Derek would smile for anything. Derek would just sit there and go, all right, yeah, okay, that's fine. So by the point that the show started, I was not Dave's best fan anyway, purely because there was all that going on behind the scenes, which was between him and the GamesMaster crew. Right, that's nothing to do with me. It was to do with me. I wasn't getting on anybody's side on that one. That was their problem. But because it meant that the show was being more and more delayed. I mean, it was about 5 hours. I was sat in the green room for about 5 hours. And because we were waiting for so long, the mood was very flat by the time we got on that thing. The only thing that helped me and Kirk was champagne. They had bought some champagne because it was the last show of the whole series to be filmed. It wasn't the last show to be shown. It was the last show to be filmed. They had champagne for afterwards, but because it kept going on, me and Kirk just cracked it open, and we're drinking champagne to get us a bit giddier. And by God, if we hadn't, that would have been the flattest comedy special we'd ever have seen, because everybody was in a bit of a mood by that point. But the other thing I will say is that because we had an awful lot of hours between getting there and when we finally started rolling the cameras, Kirk had a lot of time playing Mario 64. A lot. He had a lot of practice. Now, the one thing I will say is that Dave always complained that because Kirk was researching at the time for Earthworm Jim 3D, an awful game. Shame on you. He had played a lot of the game anyway. But I'd played a lot of Mario 64. I didn't work on the Earthworm 3D. You know, in fact, at that time, I was a journalist just like Dave. I was working on PC Review at the time. And Derek had played it, even though he only worked in arcades. So it wasn't like nobody had played it. And if Dave had been there, he would have got ample enough time to have practiced, I think, before the show. Also, there was no guarantee Dave was going to win. If he thinks it was a stitch-up, there was literally, I think I was only a point behind him by the end of that show. Right? There was no guarantees he was going to win it. So it could have been me and Kirk would have beaten me, or it could have been Derek and me, and or me and Dave would have probably beaten me. So that's where I'll go with that. Is that ultimately I know for a fact it wasn't a stitch up because I was there, and I'd seen it all happen all day, and I knew exactly what's happening. Yes, it may have been a little unfair because Kirk had more prior knowledge of the game than Dave did, but it didn't mean that Dave wouldn't have had ample opportunity to practice that level. And also a lot of the questions in that show were good for Dave. Nobody else on that show knew an awful lot about Street Fighter like Dave did, but we didn't sit there saying, "Oh, it's a stitch up."
Yeah, there's a few jokey bits in there as well, isn't there? If you look at the quiz section, I think one of his questions is like, "Oh, what happens in this clip?" And there's a bit where Sonic the Hedgehog's just about to fight a Robotnik. It's like, "Oh, Robotnik comes down and Sonic fights him," and then it cuts away to something completely random. And there's a few other bits. I think when people watch that clip, and I certainly thought this as well before we spoke to him, I think a lot of people think his reaction is purely for failing that challenge at the end. And speak to him, I think he felt sort of wound up throughout the whole show, not just that one bit at the end. And unfortunately now, a lot of people just know that clip really well, don't they? The Mario 64 incident. And, at the end of the day, he hasn't fallen off the slide on Mario 64 in their first go. It's not the biggest deal, is it, falling off of the slide?
And
I think it's more
the beauty is
the background to it.
And to be honest, I think that was a buzz around, by the way, with the Sonic What Happens Next. So it wasn't that he got given that question. I think it was a buzz around at that point.
Okay, so anyone could have had that.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea behind the show was not meant to be serious. Now I absolutely get Dave's point on this. Right, at that time, I was working on a magazine, but I was also known as being a comedy pirate. Right, Derek Lynch was just laughed at everything, and Kirk was just an idiot in a suit. Right, that was his role. Was to play Dominic's stooge. Right, so the only one that stood to lose any credibility whatsoever from the show when it comes to video games questions was Dave, because he had built himself up as a serious gaming journalist. So I totally get why he was upset. I totally get his side of things. However, the way he went about it, I thought was wrong. But then that said, if he hadn't gone about it like that, it wouldn't have given us. Well, I wouldn't be talking about it 25 odd years later.
Yeah.
You know, that ending was one of the best endings to a TV show ever.
Yeah.
Where he just said, "I've been completely stitched up," and on that bombshell, it was brilliant. It ended way better than we could have written. So, you know, Dave, in many ways, I know it's hard to be proud of it, but Dave should also be proud of that episode.
Yeah.
Because it's the episode I get asked about more often than any other.
And when we had Dave on, we made a point that doesn't define his career, what he's done in the industry.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
You know, I mentioned at work, just to someone, I said, "Oh, Dave Perry," and they were like, "Oh, the guy in the bandana from GamesMaster," you know, and like everyone knows
without
it.
a shadow of a doubt. Nobody thinks any less of him because of that episode, apart from probably the people that were there that day. You know, his reputation didn't go down. I carried on chatting with Dave for many years later. He then came back as a commentator on my reboot of Games World, which I did for Sky every single day at 7:30 in the morning. But he came back as co-commentator for that after that incident. So, you know, and I was more than happy to bring him back. And not only that, is then when he was the editor-in-chief of a load of video games magazines down in Bournemouth, I used to go to his parties. I used to, you know, we remained friends, and not one person would ever go, there's that Dave Perry, he can't handle Mario or 64. It was always Dave Perry, the journalist, or Dave Perry, the games player, or Dave Perry, the games animal.
Yeah.
So he shouldn't have worried. I think it got to him way more than perhaps it should have. Yeah. And he overreacted.
Definitely. And like I say, he's a great guy, Dave. When we spoke to him, he really opened up about the subject. I
hope he's watching, because I really need a new tattoo. And genuinely,
he on Facebook, he always when he gets free slots in his tattoo thing, he always puts an advert or a status up saying, "I've got a free slot this Saturday. Come on down." So yeah,
it's just it's in Bournemouth. That's the only problem.
Yeah,
so it's a bit far from.
No, it's Torquay.
Torquay,
Torquay now. Yeah, sorry, Torquay. Pretty much equal distance. Equidistant.
Yeah.
But you know. If I was to get a new tattoo, I would actually genuinely want Dave to do it, because we could chat about old times and in an inking party.
I think you should do it, and maybe
I get to tattoo the Mario 64 logo on my arm.
I don't know about that.
or Mario coming off of a slide.
I do like the Mario thing on his dartboard, didn't he? In the background, it was like at least he's got a sense of humour about it. He could have a Mario on a dartboard,
and also time heals all. Time heals all. We've all had things. I've had things in other shows where I've not been happy about, but you know, we all move on.
Okay, so eventually it gets to a point when GamesMaster's coming to an end, and Games World as well. You mentioned that you went on to host it or work on a series that was in the morning, and then. What was that like when that all sort of came to an end? All of a sudden, there was no more.
I've always been quite lucky, because I could then either freelance for people. I did some consultancy for computer and video games at the time, and you know, and I did a few things. But the way that the TV industry worked at that time, it was very short-term contracts, and you never got longer. And you'd get called in on the day that your contract ends, and they'd go, either you've got a contract or not. And I was one of lucky ones, probably only one or two of us, that got kept on between series. And I remember, I think it was the end of Games World Series 3 was the big one. I can't remember if that was before Games World 7, but it was one of those moments where you think, what am I going to do now? There's nothing left. We weren't talking about GamesMaster anymore. There wasn't going to be another series. I think it might have come back, but it wasn't going to. And then we were going, what are we going to do? And Jane called me into Jane Hewland, the woman who owned the production company, called me into her office, said, I just want to put you on a retainer in case we come up with something else and come up with ideas and all sorts of things. And me and a guy called Peter Scott did exactly that. We just sat there for 6 months coming up with new ideas. And we eventually launched the computer channel for Sky. and it was a whole channel of technology and gaming. And so we created that. And so I did that for a while, and then went to another company to carry on the games side of that, which is where I took Matt Berry onto, and that's Matt Berry's first ever appearance on TV. He was a runner for me, and I just said, "You're quite funny, go on telly," and he went, "All right then," and he was absolutely brilliant. And he still does the same characters today, as he did then, same voices and characters. So. But there came a time when we were coming to a point when video games. I think I missed out one. There was one. There was another show called Games Republic. It was done by the ex-production team who worked on GamesMaster, not Games World, and they had done this show called Games Republic. And for the first half of the season, it was with Trevor and Simon were the hosts. And for the first half of the season, it was Charlie Brooker was the commentating monk.
Wow.
And he quit halfway through the season. He just went, "This is demeaning." So who did they call? And I went in as the second half. And the first thing is, Trevor, is I just ended. It was for quite young kids with the contestants, so I didn't do as many knob gags. But I did a hell of a lot of monk and nun based jokes. To the extent where Trevor and Simon went, "This is more like the shows we normally do. We didn't get that from that other fellow." Yeah. Which of us has gone on to do Black Mirror?
Yeah.
And so I did that, and that was my kind of main on-screen stuff that I did outside of Games World. But we were getting to a point where TV was thinking it didn't want games anymore. We didn't have YouTube yet, so some people always blame YouTube and Twitch and all the streaming services for damaging video games television, but that didn't come for quite a while afterwards. Basically, what damaged video games television were commissioning editors telling us they didn't want video games television anymore. It was that people. I even had one quote given to me during a pitch meeting I had was, "People want to play games, they don't want to watch them." Boy, were they wrong. I mean, were they wrong.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If Twitch has proved anything, people want to watch just games. They don't want all those knob gags in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, you get it certainly with GamesMaster and Games World as well. The whole point of the commentating of the games and people chatting about it as well. But I think that is part of the pull of Twitch. Dean's in the chat, as you've seen, and someone who is a good streamer is generally, they're good at the game, or they're at least entertaining with the games. But the one thing that they are good at is commentating and chatting with their audience and just interacting with people. And that's what GamesMaster had. That's what Games World had. It's what Twitch gives people the platform to do and YouTube to do. So yeah, you're right. They were absolutely wrong on every level.
The funny thing as well with Twitch, isn't it, is that you don't actually need to be good at games to have people want to watch you. Sometimes it's funny to watch someone who's really bad at games, and as long as they can present it in a funny way, it's like, it's actually fun to watch someone be really bad at a game. So yeah.
And you don't have that barrier. The other thing is about it is you get to see a game being played, you might not have bought.
Yeah.
And it's and that again, while all of the entertainment behind GamesMaster, while all the entertainment behind Games World, that ultimately was also a massive part of it, is that we were showing brand new games that nobody had seen before.
Yeah.
And we were getting them very early in development so that we could do that. Quite often we had levels that were never even released because they built a level just for us, so that it could be shown on the show so early. And, I think that is an important part of any broadcast. And this was at a time when film 96, 97, 98, or whatever it's called, was on TV. And I said people prefer to watch films than somebody talking about them, was my response. And as in, how ludicrous is that? Or people want to listen to music rather than people talking about music. I mean, how, people want to play game shows rather than watch them. Yeah. It's genuinely, it didn't, but unfortunately that was the feeling. And that's how it kind of got until I joined the BBC in 1999. and we tried to bring a brand new show out, but I spent a year working on 2 pilot episodes of this show, which failed for a number of reasons. But the main one is that they too didn't get the concept of exactly what you were just saying, the commentary aspect, the actual, the expert aspect. Because I did the commentary for the first pilot, and I desperately asked for a co-commentator. I even asked for Alex Ferry to be my co-commentator. And I was the associate producer of the show, but at the same time, because I'd been on GamesMaster, they said, right, co-commentate over the pilot. And I had to do it on my own. And it is hard to keep up that level of enthusiasm for an entire game, well, for 5 games in the show, on your own, which is exactly why I have a lot of time for people who Twitch, who YouTube stream, because the level of enthusiasm they manage to retain so long, and that only comes through passion. That only comes through an absolute dedication in what you are talking about. And then the second episode, they scrapped my commentary because they said they couldn't cut it up enough. I mean, it's meant to be live. It's meant to be as live. And they got in Alan Green, the football commentator, and gave him script. So he was going, and he didn't know anything about games. So that's the reason why the second pilot was just didn't work. Just absolutely didn't work. And considering at the time, it's called Bleeding Thumbs, and the BBC wanted it to be the successor to Robot Wars. And it would have been had they got it right, but they ignored it. I was brought in from GamesMaster to do it, and they ignored everything I said. I said, you have to have the pictures of the contestants up in the top left-hand corner and near their health bars. Never happened. You have to do this. They just ignored everything. It's like all those things that we'd learned over 7 years. They ignored. And, and it failed for that reason. It would have been great as well, Dermot O'Leary.
I was going to ask who was going to host it. You've just
it was Dermot O'Leary and Kate Thornton for the first episode, for the first pilot. But one of the reasons why we actually had to do a second pilot is Dermot O'Leary found out that his Channel 4 contract, because he did Big Brother at that time, they wouldn't let him out the contract for the batch of filming. So Ant and Dec were going to then be the hosts. But they had to pull out because they had already double booked on something else on the only days we could film. But they would have done it otherwise. And then it ended up being Terry Alderton, the comedian, who ended up in EastEnders.
Yes, he's the cabbie, wasn't he?
Yeah, one of the funniest comedians. And Kate Thornton, again, who was on X Factor at the time. So, but it didn't really work. The last demographic didn't work as well at Dermot O'Leary. We would absolutely have been on TV had Dermot O'Leary been able to stay. Without a shadow of a doubt, he's fantastic. I still think he's fantastic, and he hasn't aged at all. He hasn't aged.
It's crazy.
That was 1999, and he looked exactly the same. Crazy.
It's mad.
But yeah, and then that was my love affair with TV completely over. I finished that series, and I came back because it was up in Manchester, and I'd moved up to Manchester for it. And I came back, and literally it was one of those moments where I did a bit of work on Question of Sport. I did a little bit of work on I Love the 80s. And then I was just called into the office and said, we're not renewing your contract. It finishes at the end of the week. I had to call up Doug Johns, again, the Games Messiah, who came up and he picked up me and some stuff and drove back to London. And I said, I'm never going to work in telly again. And as it happens, never did.
Wow, so sad.
I've appeared on TV a few times. I was on The Apprentice. As one of the judges of the app that the contestants had to build. I had my own slot on Sky News doing game reviews for a bit, but not an awful lot. And it's one of them things that I don't look for it anymore. That's all passed me by, and I certainly don't look for it anymore. And I'm more if someone asks me and it fits into my schedule, I'll say yes. So I tend to do it that way.
And with the talk of the GamesMaster revival, would you go back if you were asked?
They haven't been in touch. 10 years ago, when I was at Future Publishing at the time. I was the editor, or assistant editor of Home Cinema Choice magazine. I'd already kind of got out of the games industry by then, and but all the games mags were in the office literally next to me, and the team that were James Binns, who's the publisher of most of those magazines at the time, Official Nintendo magazine, that kind of thing, was also tasked with maybe putting GamesMaster back on telly. And he came over and he immediately said, would you help figure this out? It's a conundrum. So, and it got reported in the press that GamesMaster was going to come back. I don't even know how that got out. And so I was consultant for a time. And then I realized that it was going to be very different. And it wasn't going to be the same. And it was almost like the BBC thing, where I would tell them how to do something and they were going to go and do something else entirely.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the point of even asking?
And I kind of thought, you know what? Do I need the stress of the worry of constantly being almost like I'm the holder of the sort of like the time capsule and trying to protect the legacy? Do I need that stress? As it happens, it never went anywhere. It never really materialized. Now, 10 years later, it's materialized again at Future, but this time they've got their own in-house production team. I do worry, and I would definitely speak to them. If they called me up and said, even if you could just give us some hints on what to do, I would absolutely 100% talk to them. You know, it's an open door. I'll happily impart some knowledge. I don't mind. I don't mind if they wanted me on telly. I don't mind if they don't. But from what I've heard so far about it, I do worry where they're going with it. Yeah. Now I might be completely out. It might be the rumors aren't true, or that original posting that E4 published isn't right. But if it's not GamesMaster as was, I see no benefit whatsoever in using the GamesMaster name for the show.
Yeah.
I see huge benefit in creating a brand new video games television show. Yeah. Absolutely. Would love it. I'll be the first one every week to watch it. But I have two reasons for the GamesMaster thing. A, Series 7 of GamesMaster was excellent. Series 6 was better, but Series 7 was excellent. And we were offered Series 8 and we turned it down. And the reason why we turned it down, because they said we want half the budget. And we said we don't want to go out with an inferior show.
You go on a high.
You know, you only get remembered for your last series. And if we'd have done a worse series than season 7, we'd have been remembered for series 8 only.
Yeah.
You know, and so Dominic, at the time I was fuming. I thought it was a silly decision, but Dominic was right. He was right. We went on a high. People talk about it to this day. So there's one reason that I'm a little tentative about someone bringing back the GamesMaster name that isn't going to be GamesMaster as was.
Yeah.
Secondly, how many, if they've talked about it being part social experience or mainly social experience, part TV. Now, if it's a social experience, I presume they're aiming at a very young audience. If they're aiming at a very young audience, none of them were born when GamesMaster was around.
Yeah.
It doesn't need the name. Whatever you name it, that will be their GamesMaster.
Yeah. And for me, one thing I loved about GamesMaster, which was always one of my favorite bits that wouldn't work today, was the consultation. You know, you got the kids going in and say, "Oh, how do I do this on this game?" And that was brilliant. You have great memories watching that. Nowadays, if you get stuck on the game, you go on YouTube.
Yeah,
like it's not going to have the same gravitas.
Be honest.
Watching it from home and then going like, "This is how you get the whistle on Mario." I'm like, "That's great!" Like that's the first time I learned about that, was watching the show. Whereas now it's like, if you want to cheat, you just go online. You watch people you watch it on YouTube. You look it up. It's not going to have that wow factor that it had then.
It was such a fundamental part of the earlier series, the consultation zone. But behind the scenes, we hated it. We absolutely hated it. Yeah, same with Games World, because we did it with, of course, Jet, Diane Udall. we had the games mistress giving cheats with the videators, and we had to do the cheats. But the problem is most of the cheats didn't work, or they hadn't been tested thoroughly. We had to come up with thousands of them for a series, certainly on Games World. The presentation was so difficult, certainly for the videators, because they tried to do it in real time with no auto cue or anything. So it was like, so I remember there was one. It took me 25 takes to sort of like go, press right, left one, up, down, left one, up, right, select and start at the same time. And you had to memorize these ridiculously long code structures just to present it. So we absolutely hated it. We with a passion. And if you notice, there was a time on GamesMaster where we just said we can't do this anymore. And it was more times were changing and the games consoles were changing as well. And PlayStation certainly wasn't as easy to have codes and things. It certainly didn't seem to have as many easy to memorize or easy to present tips on PlayStation games as it was, say, on an SNES game. But also we just hated it. So as a conscious decision as a team, we just said, let's sack this. It's horrible.
Yeah.
We don't want to do this anymore.
It's interesting that you talk about, the possibility of this revival idea being, that being one thing that just wouldn't work now, but this idea of it being like a social thing, and the sort of the audience that would be kind of aiming at, because it's, I guess my daughter who's 11, she's really into gaming. She gets all of her gaming information from YouTubers. That is where she gets all of it from. She doesn't go on IGN. She doesn't go on any I guess a review site or anything like that. It's just YouTubers that she, again, enjoys the commentary of. She enjoys the way that they interact with the camera, the way they talk to her, because that's how it speaks to her. And it just kind of feels like if you're aiming for kids like that, she's, like you say, she's not going to watch it because that's not for her. They need to be
other. My son is 30 now. I mean, he was a GamesMaster toddler, because he used to come on set and things like that. And then Dominic once saved his life, which is another story entirely. But I ran a football team with Dominic, and we went to the pub after a match, and my son swallowed an ice cube and it got stuck in his esophagus, and Dominic gave him the Heimlich when he saved his life. But and my son still remembers that to this day. But he was saying to me earlier that he only ever watches YouTube. And if he was to bring it back, and he's always wanted it, Games Master to come back, but as a YouTube show. And my point with that is, I would love it. And I do work in and around tech and YouTube and Google, and I know everybody behind the scenes at Google, etc. But the problem for me is that if you want a successful immediate hit on YouTube, you are competing with hundreds of thousands of very good alternatives. If you want an immediate and successful impact on television, you have no rivals.
Totally.
So the E4 angle is brilliant, and I hope that's what they're going to do, is that maybe they'll use the social to get people interacting with the TV show a little bit more, or do something like that. I remember, Games World, the live show, we used to play video games by phone. Where the tones, but the latency was worse than Stadia. It was absolutely awful. It was literally the kid would press a button and it would be almost a 2-second latency.
We talked about this for show before. We talked about Hugo the Troll and things like that, where like someone calls up on a show and they're trying to play it, and it's like you don't have a chance.
So that aspect you can now do. That aspect they could now do very well just through online gaming, and show a challenge where someone's sitting at home. They don't even necessarily need to be in the studio against someone in the studio. And that I can understand. I can understand there's a more social aspect to it than that. But they still need that very core thing of it being a comedy show. Like back in the day, the person that I wanted to host it was Simon Amstel, which made a lot of sense to me because he'd also been a contestant as a kid on the show.
He's
so I wanted Simon Amstell.
Presenter.
Yeah. Oh, and he has that acerbic wit that I think the show needs.
Yeah.
The GamesMaster in the Cloud was going to be Dominic, because at the end of the whole of run of GamesMaster, where does it finish? Heaven. I know, on a deserted island, he comes crashing back down, doesn't he? Yeah, so that wouldn't have worked. But anyway, the idea was that he transmuted and ended up being the GamesMaster, and he was very interested in doing it because he could also record it from Canada. It's just blue screen with his head. So he was very up for it. Simon Amstell was up for it. I think that would have been a great combination. I do like the idea of Patrick Stewart being the new GamesMaster. It looks like that might not happen now for nowadays. But it needs to be someone like Ian Sterling, who I think is the modern equivalent of Dominic. I genuinely do. I think he has that same banter, that same wit, that same cheekiness, and the same accent. And quite frankly, if you're not going to call it a Golden GamesMaster joist stack, then you can go away as far as I'm concerned.
Totally.
So yeah. I also saw in your clip before, as the show was starting, that Alex Ferry had, and he does this on my podcast, which I'll talk about in a little bit if you don't mind. But he's got a Golden GamesMaster joystick. I don't have one.
No way.
No way. You don't got one.
Wow.
Yeah, I never got one. And Dominic only got his because he stole them. He never got given them. So
I always feel so bad for contestants to go on there and don't win it, and they get sent off. Sent off for nothing. Think, that's going to sting for a long time.
If Alex ever decides to sell it as well, Alex is worth a lot more than most people's, because Series 1, it might have been Series 2, they were genuinely gold-plated. Series 3 and on, for sure, they were only sprayed with a gold paint.
Wow. Yeah, it was definitely Season 1. I think it was one of the first.
Yeah,
it was one or two, wasn't it?
Yes, it was episode.
Yeah.
So his is gold-plated. So I'm very jealous of that. Very jealous indeed.
Okay, so go on, Ollie.
No. Just I just like talking about GamesMaster, man. It just makes me feel. It's such
there are so many other stories that I've probably got, and certainly I could go on all night. But maybe another time we'll go into some of the more behind the scenes stories.
You count me in.
Or maybe afterwards. It's not live streaming.
That sounds good. That sounds very good. So the present day you're working for Pocketlint, is that correct?
Pocketlint, you've got that slightly wrong. It's Pocket-Lint. Pocketlint, as in the fluff you find in the bottom of your pockets.
I'm sure
Pocketlint. I've been on Pocketlint now for 10 years. Over a decade. And absolutely love it. For starters, we all work from home, which was not only great anyway, it was particularly great for the lockdown.
Yeah,
because it meant that nothing pretty much changed. I built a massive man cave in my garden, and so I could do it all in here. But the other thing about it is that I'm the senior news editor for the site, but I get to write loads of different variety of stuff, not just video games. Video games is definitely probably my biggest passion on the site, but phones and TVs and cars and and I've got to do so many other things thanks to just Pocketlint. It's and it's a website that is mainly consumer electronics that are fun. That's our remit, is that anything that can entertain you or anything that isn't too serious. We don't talk about Bitcoin an awful lot, for example. We're more concerned with the slightly more fun aspect, and all our personalities come through as well. It's a big team, and each team member has a kind of a dedicated subject that they one's into smartwatches more than anything. There's quite a few gamers now. At one point, I was pretty much the only gamer on the team, desperately trying to get games coverage up, and everybody going, nah, nobody's interested in games. Again, it's that thing that's stuck with me all my life, but we finally got there, and Pocketlint now does as much about games as it does about anything else. It's actually it's really good fun and a brilliant team to work with. So yeah, that's that. I'll do that. I also write for a few other people. Obviously, games editor for the Metro newspaper for a couple of years. So until that ended acrimoniously, and So basically, that's where I am right this minute. Luckily, get to do all the gaming stuff without any of the having to wear a pirate's costume.
That'd be good. Yeah, if you wore that costume again, doing a review of one. Because I read, I think it was yesterday, you did a review of The Last of Us 2, and you gave it 10 out of 10. And that game is coming for a lot of criticism, but I think it's great. I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic game.
I might have even said that there was that it is polarizing. It can be polarizing, but the thing is, and this is what I've always like. I've reviewed games since 1987 professionally, and apart from an afterburner incident in 1988 for the Spectrum, where I reviewed the game from a poster, hadn't seen it, and gave it a really good score, and it turned out to be horse shit. I have always been very honest, always been upfront and honest, and I am a very enthusiastic person generally. I've always looked at the positive things more than I look at the negative things, always. And so I will score something not necessarily the same as somebody else because I liked it.
Yeah, totally.
And I always try and say that. And I always try and say that. Some people criticize. I have had some criticism in the past saying that my reviews are sometimes glaringly too positive. And I'll go, but that's the way I felt when I was writing it. Yeah, if I felt that. Doesn't mean that somebody else might hate it. And in fact, Life is Strange is a perfect one for that, because I said there are all people out there that hate that game. So slow. It's so slow in the build-up, and it's so measured in the way it works, but that's the point of the game, and some people hate that. I'm particularly not a big fan of Warzone. I can see its merits, but I'm rubbish at it.
Yeah.
Anything I'm rubbish at tends to sway my opinion. So yeah, that, you know, and Last of Us Part 2, that was a prime example, and I've only ever given perfect scores, and like we only mark out a 5 on Pocketlint, which means that sometimes you'll give a game a 5, but it's really a 9. But do you know what I mean? It's like, it's maybe, and I'll try and say that it's not perfect, but it's still worth 5. But that is one of very few games that I've given a genuine perfect score to.
Yeah.
The only other one that I remember at the back of my head is The Last Ninja Part 3, I think it was. And it was my last ever issue of Your Commodore. We were being closed down. And I said, as a way of going out, I'm not going to see a game better than this on the Commodore. As it was, I ended up launching a brand new Commodore 64 magazine. But, and ended up reviewing more games. But my point at that time was that I probably won't be playing any more Commodore 64 games. And this is the best I think that the media can get. And I thought the same with Last of Us Part 2. It was the best that the PlayStation 4 will ever get. Yeah. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Absolutely. Because for me, when you play as Abby, I suppose it's been out for a year now, I can spoil it, but you play Abby initially because of what she did. I didn't want to play as her. I hated her. Absolutely hated her. And then as you progress through, and then you get to the end, and then you're fighting Ellie and Abby, you're both fighting. I was like, I don't want to kill her. I really like her. I don't want to.
You empathise with her. Yeah. There's quite a lot of that. But then there's also some games where you're meant to empathise with a character and you just never find that connection. And trying to think of one off the top of my head, I can't think of anything specifically, but that has happened quite a lot. I also have this thing where I don't want to review bad games. I'll give that to somebody else to review. I'm in that privileged position now where I don't have to write every review on the site. We have a lot of people that like games on our team, and they will write reviews. So I tend to, if I know something's going to be a bit of a stinker, or I'm not going to like it, it might be a brilliant game, but I just won't like it because it's a certain type of game that I'm not good at, or I'm not fond of, then I will give it to somebody else. So that's another reason why a lot of my reviews come across positive, because only choose the positive games that I think I'm going to like.
Mm.
And then there are games that surprise me. Psychonauts 2 is the game that I finished it yesterday, and that completely surprised me. I didn't think I'd like it. I genuinely didn't. And I think so far it's my favorite game of the year.
Wow.
So and then that happens, and that's a joyous moment. That is a joyous moment. And then there's a Kenny Dalglish's soccer match on the Amstrad CPC. And when I reviewed that, I said that the cost of the inlay was overinflated in comparison to the quality of the game. I said I gave it 1 for being able to reuse the plastic casing. That's 1 out of 100. It's 1%, because I could reuse the plastic casing for a different game.
Wow.
Something I've broken.
Brilliant.
So sometimes it's fun to write a stinker as well.
Yeah.
It really is. Certainly back in the day when that's the other thing. Games reviews back in the 80s and 90s. What, 400 words long?
Yeah.
Nowadays, God,
pages and pages.
So much more to cover.
I wrote 2,000 words today on Life is Strange. 2,000 words on WarioWare, and it's hard to even keep to that because games are so much more complex, so much layers in games now that it's hard to actually cut your words down, let alone do it. And it's again, that's a bit of advice I would give anybody, is that certainly if you're online, try not to write so many words. People won't read the end. They can't. They online. So do try to watch out how many words you write, and try to be more concise in your writing, because people want the passion, but they don't need pages and pages of exposition.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk about the way in which you sort of I guess, like, approach things, and the fact that you are honest with, well, I like it, and that's just how I feel. Because certainly with some outlets, I'm quite picky with the places I go for reviews now, just purely because half of them you just become so pushed apart from, I guess, because you can kind of almost tell what certain people are going to think of a particular game, because you immediately know that they're either doing it. Certainly with some people, they just say, oh, it's rubbish, because they want to have that negative people clicking on it, and it's almost like they're just trolling their audiences. Oh, this is a terrible game, because it just pulls in the people that don't like it, and it also pulls in the people that do like it, who come to its defense. But then on the flip side, you also know with a lot of the big outlets, like you were talking about Warzone, it is not for me. I haven't even downloaded it. I know it's not for me because I've watched people play it and you go, yeah, nah. But there'll be outlets that just, gush over it, because they know full well that if they don't, their readers will disappear. And that's also
there is that, and online has kind of brought that through more than anything. I mean, certainly back in the days of even in the Games Mag wars. I mean, the only way I could pretty much see a similarity between what was going on back then and now was the cover wars for magazines. Is that there were so many Sega Mega Drive magazines, or there were so many SNES magazines, that to get an exclusive cover of a certain game was such a big deal. How on earth do you slag off that game? It's impossible. And that alludes back to what I kind of said before with what I did about Afterburner on the ZX Spectrum. In fact, we had it on the cover, and we were a weekly magazine, and the cover had already gone to press, and the game hadn't turned up by deadline day. Wow. So what did we do? I ended up having to write a star cover review based on a game I'd never seen.
That's unbelievable.
Apart from the fact I played it in the arcade, and of course that's nothing like the Spectrum version. No. So and then you're in that situation. Well, what? And you think, I was a brand new, fresh-faced oik who had done fanzines, who didn't, I didn't know how to construct a story well or an article well, but I was asked to write complete fantasy for 400 words on this cover story. So I gushed about it. Of course you would, because if you said it was awful and it turned out to be really good, you'd be sued. So I was, so I sort of like said, oh, it's excellent, and it turned out to be awful, absolutely awful. I learned a very valuable lesson that day. It's never been repeated. But during those big magazine years, to get that game in there was so much pressure. Not people. There's some comment about people being put under pressure by PRs. There was a little bit of that, but there was more pressure being put on you to at least give it a chance if it was going to be your cover.
Mm-hmm.
What I loved about CMVG is more often than not, if a game was bad and they still had it on the cover, they would still say it was bad. And again, I learned a lot from that, just that little period that I spent there as well, in consulting with them. So, you know, I do that kind of sort of like does match with what's happening online. The difference with online is that you are entirely rated by your clicks.
Yeah.
Your entire career is rated on your clicks. Your wages are paid by clicks and affiliates and advertising on websites. And if people aren't clicking, then they're doing something wrong. Now, sometimes that might mean you have a polar opposite position than somebody else on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It might mean something else. Most of the time, it doesn't. Most of the time, or certainly all the people I know and respect, because I've been, you know, there are so many websites I trust now, and I know which ones I trust. And like you say, I know which ones I trust and know which ones I don't. Particularly, massive shout out here to VGC for me. VGC is run by old friends of mine at Future, and that's a fantastic site for reviews. I trust it thoroughly.
Yeah, I go to VGC.
But you know, but no matter what happens, even if you are being honest and you're being positive from an honest standpoint, you're still called a shill anyway. You're still being accused of being paid anyway. There isn't a day gone by that I haven't been accused of being paid by a corporation, either in the tech industry or in the games industry. Not a day gone by. Purely because you say something's good that somebody else somewhere doesn't like. Today 100%. I had an argument with a guy about a soundbar. It just happens, you know. It's like it's one of them things. You know, and do you know what? I will always engage. Some just ignore the comments. To be honest, you know, sometimes to my detriment, I will try to engage. But I will, you know, that's the way I am, and I'll try to help them understand why I see it that way. And then there are people that just go, "Yeah, but you're a shill. Yeah, but you've been paid to say even this. Yeah, but you've been paid, and you're never going to win. You're never going to win.
Just disengage that point, don't you? It's like, yeah.
I mean, it's like
do is enjoy yourself.
Yeah, it's like a friend of our channel, Essex Retro Gamer, who's on YouTube. He done a video about the Amico and television, saying he was quite looking forward to its release. He's got hounded, got called a shill, got accused of being paid, and you know it's
awful.
And then
that's awful.
They then make comments about him and his children and his fiance.
Yeah,
I just think they're scumbags. You know, if you go down that road, you're a scumbag. Absolute scumbag.
I had it. I was misquoted for an article for the Press Association. I did a quote about online gaming during the lockdown, and that gamers should be a little bit more wary about using up all the bandwidth. It was right at the beginning of lockdown, and what I kind of meant was it was after the all the Warzone players were just downloading and downloading downloading. And of course, we're talking about a mammoth game. So, but I was kind of misquoted, and it kind of came out as if I was just slagging off online gaming. Right? And wasn't what I meant. Wasn't what I meant at all. I got brutally attacked over Twitter for it because it ended up in US newspapers, in the Daily Mail, and I got attacked as an anti-gaming person, which is almost the opposite. Almost the opposite of everything I've ever done. And I was attacked on YouTube. I was attacked by all these people, and I tried to engage with as many. Some now, I've now got as followers and friends, but a lot came from the US, and they really were brutal. Turned out they were all QAnon and MAGA.
Amazing.
And you know, and I went down that rabbit hole of trying to find out who was having a go at me. One guy invited me on his show to justify myself because he said, "I believe what your original story. Come on my show." And I sort of like went into his background because his show seemed angry, but talking about games sometimes. and found out that he's a massive QAnon and a massive conspiracy theorist, and believes that and that I was being paid by Netflix for some reason to ruin the games industry. So, I very luckily avoided that rabbit hole trap.
The whole. I mean, this is going on as a complete tangent off of gaming now, I guess, but the door's open. So, yeah, I think if anyone becomes associated with anything specifically like QAnon, for me, it just gets put in the bracket of flat earthers. It's just like you can't prove anything, and you're just weird. Just
without a shadow of a doubt,
desperate to belong. That's all it is.
I'll tell you one thing. One phrase that does irk me a bit is you need to be open-minded and do your research. It's like, we could be open-minded, do your research, and still disagree with you.
Yeah, exactly.
No matter what you say, I'm going to disagree. Without a shadow of a doubt, I'll do my research and then disagree with you.
And still disagree. Just because you think that if you have more information, you'll be in my way of thinking. It's like, no.
But there was a time.
They call it research, don't they? But it's not even research. It's just watching more YouTube videos, and that's all it is. It's not research, really.
The problem we face as well, I'm going really far down a rabbit hole now, is that everyone needs to remember that Facebook, Google, the internet algorithm is actually designed to keep you engaged and keep you watching it. So it's actually catering to your interests. So if you believe in that sort of thing, if you start typing something into Google, it'll auto-populate the top search to be something that you're agreeing with. So you could type in COVID-19 and somebody in one part of the world might get is a hoax and here's why, and someone else on the other side of the world is like COVID-19 vaccine update and things like that. It's going to be completely different because the internet wants you engaged, and it's basically feeding you more information that's in line with what your search history is. So actually people start believing that, it encourages them to believe that, and that's what creates a bigger and bigger problem. And
well, anyone who's just joined us, this isn't a COVID-19 debate. We have been talking about games this evening. Sorry,
I can help bring it back to games.
Bring it back.
There was a time in the gaming industry that I felt like, as a game in gaming, certainly in the gaming journalism and in games industry terms, that we were QAnon, if you know what I mean. I'm not saying that we were nuts. What I'm saying is that we were treated like that. We were treated like a real small pariah group of people that weren't there to be considered as genuine. And like games journalist was not something you said. You said journalist because people would laugh if you said games journalist. It was quite sad. But at the same time, look where it's become. Look where it's come. And I don't know a single person who doesn't game in one way or another. Not one.
Yeah.
No, my dad is in his mid-70s and he has finished every single Tomb Raider there's ever been.
Wow.
Right? And currently plays almost every day Neverwinter, the MMORPG. So, I don't know anybody that doesn't game in some fashion, even if it's just on their phone or anything else. So I do like the fact that we've lifted that sense of sort of leprosy that we were tagged with back in the 80s and 90s, and that it's now a very creditable pursuit. The only problem, and I think Kirk McGovern, I think it is his name. Off of he was on The Gamer, but I think he's just left. He said the other day that why do the media not have a games person who then educates the other parts of like a newspaper staff on what games really are? And that is the one area, that's the one bastion that will hardly ever accept us, is newspaper mentality of departmentalization, that one department goes games are bad, the other department says games are good, because they're writing about the games, but the other ones are writing about a psychopath in a town in the north of England. And sadly, that unfortunately seems to always bring us down in the same way, in an alternative way to the way that, say, movies and music are considered. Although they get their own problems and they get their own hate mail, certainly from the press, I do still feel that games have never quite escaped that, and it's sad. It's a sad thing.
I think when Dave Perry was on, he was talking about and I'd never heard it likened it like it before, and it really, I think it has stuck with me, and I think it is the best way to describe the games industry in sort of probably more for me the 90s. Was he said that was our version of punk rock. It was ours, and it was only ours, and only we understood it. And it's only in the latter part of its life now, like you say, where gaming is, that people were like, oh yeah, it really was it was just as important then as it is now. It's just more people openly talk about it now. But I always loved the way that Dave called it. It was our punk rock, you know.
That is a really good way of putting it. Certainly because video games journalism back then was quite different in the fact that everybody, it wasn't just the video games journalists that were quite friendly with each other. It was the industry as a whole. Now that there is still an element of that, but obviously it's a much bigger industry, so it's a lot harder for everybody to be connected in some way or another. Plus, I do feel that younger, new games journalists are very much more. They remind me of the journalists on the NME back in the 90s. They're much more into the craft of writing about video games, rather than, and I'm certainly not slagging off. That is a compliment. I mean that as a compliment. It's different, but it is a compliment. Whereas we thought we were the luckiest people on earth to be able to write about video games for a living. That's mental.
Yeah.
What? And you're giving me money to do this stuff? You idiot! Right? And that mentality lasted me throughout the late 80s, all the way through the 90s, because it was just that. There was just a sense of, we cannot believe we've got our dream jobs. Now I do think it's very different. I think and you even have you only have to look at the organisations, the organisations that own multiple websites, and the way that it's all constructed now, to know that it's a far more professionally run side to that part of the industry. Plus, the people that I know that consider themselves video games journalists are appalled, or at least don't want to be so associated with being actually in the games industry at all. They want to be known as, we write about video games. That's the games industry. We write about them. We aren't them.
Yeah.
Whereas back in mine and Dave's day, we were them. Doesn't mean we gave their games any better scores. Doesn't mean we liked anything more. Doesn't mean we didn't do a whole issue of CMVG where we gave everything 82%, because one PR once said to us that 82% was what they needed to get into Virgin Megastores. So we did it out of a protest.
No way.
Even the worst games. Then, you couldn't do any of that stuff now, because you would be seen as not credible. And, didn't mean it was not credible then. It just meant it was very different. And we had a laugh. Oh, we had an absolute laugh. It was one of the best moments. I remember going to one computer industry party where everybody had to pay £15 for a ticket, but the booze was going to be free for as long as it lasted. So me and some of the Games World team kept going up to the counter and going, "I have 4 beers, please." Taking them back and creating our own beer mountain. And we have 4 beers, and we stole all the drink. And eventually we had a beer mountain that was still just all beers. And then we started sort of like only, you want a beer? All right, you can have 1 beer.
£2.
Yeah. And we were in I can't remember what it was called, but it was the forerunner to MCV, which is the trade industry, video games trade industry magazine. We were called the Games Industry Mafia for a bit, because for that reason, and for a few other things that happened at parties. But again, everybody laughs at these things because we were together. We were all together.
Yeah.
Nobody was the victim. That's the thing, is that we weren't victim. Nobody was a victim at that point. Everybody had a great laugh with each other.
That's the best way.
And some of them people are still my best friends to this very, very day.
Yeah, and that I think is a really nice point to end this stream on, because I'm conscious we've had 2 hours of your time now.
That's all right. Can I just
of course.
can I have a plug?
Yeah,
yeah, clearly.
Yeah. I, as well as all the Pocketlint stuff, I'm also starting my own podcast very, very soon. It might be this Friday, but if not, it's the following Friday. It will be available on all your favourite podcasting platforms of choice. Where it's called Games Lifer, and I will be interviewing somebody who, like myself, has either had a lifetime in games or has been in the games industry for a considerable amount of time, or has just had a life of love in games, but might be someone of note for another reason. It could be a footballer, it could be something else. I will be doing a series of these. I don't know when they're all going to record, so I don't know how regular they will be at the moment. But the very first one is with Alex Very, Big Boy Barry, who I was his producer and brought him into the whole shebang in the first place. So, and it is utterly brilliant. It's utterly brilliant. And you really please do look out for it. Called Games Lifer, all one word. Nothing to do with GamesMaster. It's not a rip-off. Don't tell my... I have very good lawyers.
and this will be available on Apple Store, Google Play.
It'll be on iTunes, Spotify. If I can be bothered to do something on YouTube, I'll do it on YouTube as well. But it's going to be an audio podcast to begin with, because I was having a really bad hair day.
Well, if you ever get desperate, we're always available. We'll
excellent. I'd happily have you all on. I'd happily have you all on and talk about your retro experiences. I mean, genuinely, the one thing that I love, and I've loved appearing on this, and I love you guys for what you do, because retro gaming is such a misrepresented side of the industry. I think we are constantly talking about remasters, trying to bring everything up to date. There are a lot of games that don't need that. They do not need touching. They just need to be played again.
Yeah.
And so, I'm fully behind you guys. I've built 2 Raspberry Pi machines. I've got a GPI case literally in front of me right now. So, and an Evercade. I haven't reviewed it yet. And I keep asking when the review's coming up. It's very good. It's very good. But yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me on this pod.
Thank you for coming.
We really appreciate it. Just one quote. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Another 2 minutes. If that's all right, Rick.
Yeah, of course.
I know I tweeted earlier that I've got an idea for like a mockumentary about Big Boy Barry.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to slim it down. I was going to give you the whole episode guide for all the episodes I've got. But basically what it is, it's him as he is now, married, couple of kids. I won't tell you all the episodes I've got, but one is with yourself, and what I want to do is sort of go over it. So it starts off, I want to get Mean Machine Dean in it, because I think he's great. Love Dean, he's so funny. So
he's old enough now to hit with the bat myself. I'd hit him with the bat.
Yeah. So it starts off, Alec, or Big Boy Barry, has been interviewed by Mean Machine Dean, and they're talking about obviously the clip with the baseball bat, whacking the stomach coming off, and they haven't seen or heard from you since when that happened. So they're like, right, well, I wonder what Rick's up to, And then it cuts to like on films, and people look through binoculars and you see like a infinity sign, you see the 2 circles. So it cuts to that, and all you hear is, "I'm going to get my revenge, Barry, just you watch." Then it cuts to a week forward, and it's you as the Violet Blade, and you're in prison because you've been banged up since that incident. So what I want to have is like a montage, like Mr. T in Rocky 3, where he's doing all the pull-ups and the push-ups. So we get a montage in prison doing that. And
like Con Air.
Yeah.
That section in Con Air without the muscles.
Well, maybe the mullet as well. Maybe we can get the mullet. Maybe we get that done. But there's going to be like loads of pictures of Barry on the on the walls, on on dartboards, etc. So that's what I've got so far. Obviously, it's not finished. So if you're free to film that, just let us know. We'd love to get you involved. But what
can it end with me getting the Captain Birdseye gig?
Deal. We get that.
Because I think that's where Violet Blade ended up. He ended up just literally being the face of Fish Fingers. That's that's where I see him. Is that he all fell down and he ended up the only work he could get. And it's not even like Birdseye, it's like a Norwegian brand that nobody's ever heard of.
Whatever you want. You can have writing control. Is it creative control? That's what I call it.
Creative control.
So yeah, it's only a
knob gag.
You stick as many knob gags in you. I'm happy with those. So it's very, very, very rough at the minute.
Ooh, fish fingers, have we?
I'll be holding the binoculars with the fish fingers. So
would you like to see? There you go. There's the advert that I can end up appearing in. It's the Violet Blade going, and you've got to taste the Violet Blade's fishy fingers.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's good. It certainly has to fit. So yeah, like I said, it's only rough. But what I'm going to do is call
only rough. Episode. You've written about 2 lines.
That's only to that episode. But what I'm going to do, each episode is going to be called. It's going to be like a parody on a movie. So I've got When Barry Met Sally.
Brilliant.
I've got the Moonies, like the Goonies. And the one with yourself is going to be called A History of Violet. Like a history of violence.
Yeah,
brilliant.
So, yeah,
I'm up for that.
All right, magic. We get that
Definitely
signed.
Up for that.
We get that contract signed.
We'll do it. Unfortunately, I haven't got any other costumes still, or at least I probably have, but I couldn't fit in it anyway.
Oh, we can get a
but I do have a mod hat and a pea coat, and everybody said I look like Captain Birdseye in that anyway. So
we won't get you a chest.
I said that was
because you don't want to.
And as long as Steve Coogan hasn't now bloody trademarked, I can say, God damn, I should have trademarked it at the time.
Yeah, would have made a fortune. No, honestly, it's been amazing. So thank you so much.
It really has been. And before we go, you just need to give a yes/no answer to this. I'm a big wrestling fan, and wrestling fans love a return. Do you ever think we'll see you, Dominic Diamond, Dave Perry, and the others at a gaming convention, all doing a Q&A one day?
Sadly not. Although I do think we'll see something maybe online where me, Dominic, and David will meet up, because I know that one of the rewards in the GamesMaster book Kickstarter was for Dominic to meet up with Dave after many, many years. And I understand that we're going to try and do a little reunion. It might be and it might be filmed. But unfortunately, as much as I love it, I'd happily, I'm sure Dave would. But Dominic lives in Canada for starters, which is always going to be a barrier.
Let's start a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
We'll get you both out of Canada. We will make it happen.
Dominic's probably the one. And sometimes he loves talking about this stuff, and sometimes he absolutely bores it. So, whereas myself, Alex, Dave, we love it. we happily talk about it, I'm not sure it will ever happen. I wish it would, but I'm not confident. However, I would like to get Dominic on my podcast one day, and that would be a proper reunion, because I haven't spoken to him properly for about 20 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah, apart from on Facebook about the book.
Yeah. We've got to make it happen then.
Yeah, we will make it happen. That will be our goal now. We will make this happen. But like everyone said, Rick, it's been a real honour to have you on our channel. It's been amazing hearing your stories, and we could sit here for hours. And I hope we get to have you on in the future, and we'll explore even more into the world of GamesMaster and Games World. So thank you again, and
my pleasure.
Thank you, and I've been asked to play Triangle Face Laser Eyes out again. So just before we go, just want to thank everyone for watching, and we'll catch you in 2 weeks for Lady Decade on what date's 2 weeks? The 22nd of September. So until then, we will see you then, and have a good couple of weeks.
All right, everyone. Take care.